What if the ocean itself was the perfect spy? What if silence meant survival, and one wrong ping could end the world? Beneath the calm surface of the sea lie stories of men trapped inside steel coffins, chasing ghosts through sonar static. These forgotten submarine thrillers are more than war films. They are lessons in paranoia, precision, and impossible choices. Let's dive deep. Number 12. The Bedford Incident, 1965. When it first surfaced, the Bedford Incident was dismissed as another Cold War naval drama. But beneath its crisp uniforms and military protocol, it hid one of the tensest psychological duels ever filmed at sea. Starring Richard Widmark as the obsessed Captain Finlander and Sidney Poitier as a skeptical journalist, the film turned the claustrophobic tension of nuclear brinkmanship into art. The story follows an American destroyer hunting a Soviet submarine in icy northern waters. The chase becomes a deadly ritual as Finlander pushes his exhausted crew beyond reason, determined to prove his dominance. Each sonar ping echoes like a heartbeat, until the line between hunter and hunted blurs into madness. Some whispered that the Pentagon grew uneasy about how accurately the film mirrored real tactical procedures. Its portrayal of sonar sweeps, fire control sequences, and command escalation was frighteningly precise. Naval consultants reportedly distanced themselves, fearing the movie might reveal too much about strategic decision protocols during submarine confrontations. Behind the scenes, director James B. Harris, a Kubrick collaborator, demanded authenticity. Real naval veterans were used as extras, and the sonar room was built from declassified blueprints. The tension on set mirrored the story itself. Widmark reportedly stayed in character for days, creating a near mutiny among the crew. When audiences left theaters, they did so in silence. The ending, an abrupt flash of annihilation, shocked critics who expected patriotism but got moral despair. Today, the film is rarely screened, yet it remains one of the most accurate depictions of Cold War command pressure ever made. It predicted the ethical meltdown of deterrence itself. Number 11. Hell and High Water, 1954. Before the Cold War became cliché, Hell and High Water imagined it in chilling Technicolor. Directed by Samuel Fuller, it was both a patriotic adventure and a grim warning about science run wild. Critics at the time dismissed it as propaganda, but decades later, historians praised its eerie realism in depicting nuclear sabotage beneath the sea. The film follows a disavowed submarine crew hired by a French scientist to stop communist agents from triggering a nuclear attack that could start World War III. The mission takes them under Arctic ice, through radiation clouds, and finally into a moral fog where loyalty means choosing who lives and who dies. Fuller himself was a World War II veteran obsessed with operational accuracy. He hired real Navy consultants to choreograph torpedo maneuvers and sonar detection. The submarine interior was not a Hollywood stage, but a full-scale mock-up built to claustrophobic proportions. Actors sweated in recycled air while the camera moved like a trapped witness. Government officials quietly questioned whether Fuller's script contained classified references to early atomic delivery systems. Studio memos show unease over his decision to show radiation effects on crewmen. Some sequences were edited under pressure, creating rumors that the original cut was far darker. At release, it underperformed, yet its influence rippled through later classics from Run Silent, Run Deep to Crimson Tide. Its moral question remains haunting. What happens when science and secrecy collide in a vessel built for death? Beneath its patriotic veneer, Hell and High Water dared to ask if survival itself was still moral. Number 10. Ice Station Zebra, 1968. When Ice Station Zebra premiered, audiences expected Arctic spectacle. What they got was espionage frozen in steel and silence. Starring Rock Hudson, Patrick McGoohan, and Ernest Borgnine, it turned a rescue mission into a cryptologic duel between East and West. The plot follows an American nuclear submarine sent to the North Pole to recover film capsules from a spy satellite. But as sabotage cripples the vessel, trust disintegrates. Every officer becomes a potential traitor. Every command could be a lie. The underwater sequences were shot using cutting-edge miniature effects that remain startlingly realistic even today. Rumors swirled that the story was inspired by a classified incident involving a lost reconnaissance capsule and a covert retrieval under the ice. MGM publicly denied any connection, but the technical accuracy was uncanny. Even the use of ballast control and under-ice surfacing reflected real naval tactics unknown to the public at the time. The production nearly sank, literally. A full-size submarine set flooded during shooting, destroying cameras and delaying release by months. McGoohan reportedly clashed with Hudson over creative control, mirroring the film's own battle of authority. Critics found it cold and impersonal, but veterans recognized the rhythm of real submarine operations. The waiting, the suspicion, the slow terror of a malfunction at depth. In later years, Ice Station Zebra found redemption on television marathons. Real Submariners called it one of the most technically faithful films ever made. Beneath its Hollywood gloss, it understood the truth of undersea warfare, that the deadliest enemy is not the one outside the hull, but the doubt echoing inside it. Number 9. The Enemy Below, 1957. Few films have captured the dance of death between hunter and hunted as precisely as The Enemy Below. Released during the height of post-war tension, it surprised audiences by daring to humanize both sides of the conflict. Robert Mitchum played the cool, calculating American destroyer captain, while Kurt Jürgens embodied the weary but brilliant German U-boat commander. What followed was not just battle, but mutual recognition of professional respect. The film's premise is elegantly simple. An American destroyer in the Atlantic locks onto a hidden U-boat. For 2 relentless hours, they circle each other in a game of patience and precision. Every torpedo, every sonar ping becomes a heartbeat in this duel of intellects. But instead of glorifying one side, the film exposes how alike both captains are. 2 men trapped in machinery built for mutual destruction. The Navy cooperated in production, but insisted on reviewing the script line by line. The accuracy of anti-submarine tactics, zigzag maneuvers, depth charge intervals, and sonar sweeps was unprecedented. Some veterans privately praised the film for getting it right, while others feared it revealed too much about classified tactics still in use. Behind the scenes, tensions mirrored the script. Mitchum reportedly demanded authentic naval routines, even refusing to reshoot scenes that violated protocol. Director Dick Powell, a former actor turned filmmaker, pushed for realism over glamour. The crew worked inside heat-soaked mock-ups of confined spaces, often fainting under studio lights to replicate the claustrophobic atmosphere. When it premiered, critics called it too procedural, but sailors recognized something deeper. This was not propaganda, it was truth. The Enemy Below remains the gold standard for submarine realism, a film that understood war as mathematics and madness fused together. Its ending, 2 captains saluting each other as their vessels die, still echoes the tragic honor of silent warfare. Number 8. Das Boot, 1981. Few films have made audiences feel the suffocation of submarine combat like Das Boot. When Wolfgang Petersen released his German-language epic, it shattered expectations. This was not the clean heroism of Hollywood. This was sweat, oil panic, and the smell of recycled air. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece of authenticity. Sailors called it a memory brought to life. The story follows a German U-boat crew during World War II. They begin idealistic, singing patriotic songs, but soon face the brutal truth of underwater combat. Every dive brings death closer. Every surface command risks detection. The camera moves through the narrow steel corridors like a ghost, and the audience becomes part of the crew, exhausted, terrified, and half-mad. Petersen's team built a full-scale working submarine interior on hydraulics, so the cast could feel every tilt and crash. Cinematographer Jost Vacano strapped cameras to his body to crawl through impossibly tight spaces. Actors were forbidden to bathe during long shoots to maintain realism. The result was not a film, but an experience of entrapment. Its release sparked controversy. German conservatives accused Petersen of romanticizing U-boat warfare. Veterans defended it, arguing it finally showed their suffering rather than glorifying it. Internationally, some studios hesitated to distribute a German-language war epic, fearing it would not sell. Yet it became a phenomenon translated and restored into multiple versions, including a 6-hour director's cut that still grips viewers today. Decades later, Das Boot remains the definitive submarine thriller. Its sonar pulses and whispered commands became cinematic legend. Beneath its technical mastery lies its message. War reduces every ideology to the same primal fight for breath. The ocean does not care who you fight for, it only waits to claim you. Number 7. The Hunt for Red, October, 1990. When The Hunt for Red October surfaced, it redefined what realism could look like in a blockbuster. Based on Tom Clancy's meticulous novel, it merged authentic submarine strategy with political chess. Sean Connery's turn as Captain Ramius, a Soviet defector commanding a stealth submarine, turned an action movie into a thinking man's thriller. The film's premise feels simple, yet monumental. A new Russian sub, capable of silent propulsion, vanishes during its maiden voyage. The Americans fear an attack. The Russians fear betrayal. Only one CIA analyst, Jack Ryan, believes the captain intends to defect. What follows is a deadly cat-and-mouse pursuit across the Atlantic, played out through sonar screens and whispered code words. The production achieved near-military precision. The U.S. Navy cooperated but drew strict boundaries. Much of the set design came from declassified sources and first-hand accounts from submariners. The Red October itself was constructed full-scale with functional hydraulics to simulate dives and tilts. Actors underwent technical briefings to learn proper command posture. Behind closed doors, real military analysts debated the film's accuracy. Clancy's descriptions of sonar behavior, magnetic propulsion, and stealth acoustics were so precise that the Pentagon briefly reviewed the script for possible leaks. Connery himself learned authentic command phrases to enhance realism, refusing to treat the role as fantasy. Audiences were hypnotized not by explosions, but by silence, the hum of sonar, the creak of pressure, hulls the unspoken fear that one wrong sound could start a war. Critics called it both thrilling and terrifyingly plausible. 3 decades later, The Hunt for Red October still defines Cold War cinema. It proved that tension need not roar. Sometimes it only needs to whisper through steel corridors miles below the surface. Number 6. Run, Silent, Run Deep, 1958. In Run, Silent, Run, deep duty turns into obsession, and silence becomes a weapon. Starring Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster, this was the film that first showed submarine warfare as psychological combat. Released during the height of post-war patriotism, it shocked audiences by daring to expose command rivalry and human frailty inside the supposedly perfect U.S. Navy. The story follows Commander L. Richardson, played by Gable, a veteran, haunted by the loss of his previous submarine to a Japanese destroyer nicknamed Bongo Pete. Obsessed with revenge, he takes command of a new vessel from the younger and popular officer Jim Bledsoe, played by Lancaster. As they hunt their unseen enemy across the Pacific, a mutiny brews under the surface. The film's title becomes its creed: silence, depth, patience. Navy officials originally opposed parts of the script, calling it subversive. It portrayed chain of command breaking down under psychological pressure and depicted mutiny with alarming detail. Rumors suggest that even the film's depiction of sonar tactics and torpedo evasion maneuvers came uncomfortably close to real post-war doctrine. Behind the scenes, Gable and Lancaster reportedly clashed as fiercely as their characters. Gable, a fading legend, insisted on portraying Richardson with icy control, while Lancaster wanted raw emotion. The tension between them crackled on screen, making every glance feel like a threat. Director Robert Wise turned those rivalries into fuel, crafting a film where every silence screamed. When it was released, critics praised its authenticity, but some called it too grim. Yet over time, it became the foundation for every submarine thriller that followed. Its influence rippled through Crimson Tide and The Hunt for Red October. The legacy of Run, Silent, Run Deep lies in its simple truth. Underwater war is not about noise, but about the unbearable weight of waiting to die quietly. Number 5. The Silent Enemy, 1958. Before high-tech sonar and nuclear submarines, there were frogmen, divers risking their lives under the sea, armed with nothing but explosives and nerve. The Silent Enemy dramatized this unseen war. Based on real events, it told the story of Lionel Crabb, a British naval officer who led daring underwater missions against Italian divers during World War II. The film was not only suspenseful, it was eerily prophetic. At release, British critics hailed it as patriotic, but foreign observers saw something darker: a portrait of men reduced to silent ghosts, fighting for survival. Each underwater sequence was filmed using real Royal Navy divers and pioneering camera rigs designed for clarity in murky depths. The realism was so intense that several stuntmen suffered decompression injuries during production. Its controversy came years later. In 1956, Lionel Crabb disappeared mysteriously while investigating a Soviet warship docked in Portsmouth. The government censored details, labeling the case a state secret. When The Silent Enemy premiered 2 years later, audiences drew immediate parallels. Some whispered that the film had predicted Crabb's fate. Others believed it was an attempt to distract from what really happened. Behind the camera, producer Anthony Squire faced pressure to tone down accuracy in depicting naval sabotage tactics. The Admiralty worried the film revealed too much about secret underwater operations. Despite the edits, it still stands as one of the most detailed portrayals of pre-sonar warfare ever shot. For decades, it remained forgotten, overshadowed by nuclear-age epics. Yet modern historians now call The Silent Enemy one of the purest expressions of human endurance under pressure. There are no computers, no commands from distant admirals, just breath lungs and silence. Its title was more than poetic. It was the truth. The ocean itself was the enemy. Number 4. Crimson Tide, 1995. Few films have captured the terror of nuclear command as vividly as Crimson Tide. Directed by Tony Scott, empowered by volcanic performances from Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington, it became the ultimate cinematic showdown between authority and conscience. What made it unforgettable was not its style, but its terrifying realism in depicting nuclear launch protocol inside a ballistic missile submarine. The story unfolds aboard the USS Alabama during a political crisis in post-Soviet Russia. When communication with command is lost, the captain believes he must launch nuclear missiles, while his executive officer argues for restraint. What follows is mutiny by procedure, a duel of logic played out under red emergency lights and claustrophobic silence. The film's technical detail alarmed actual Navy officials. It revealed the real format of nuclear launch authentication codes and dramatized split-second command structures. The Pentagon reportedly demanded several script revisions before offering limited cooperation. Some sequences showing missile tube arming procedures were reconstructed entirely from public archives, yet they looked frighteningly authentic. Behind the scenes, tension was as electric as the script. Hackman and Washington filmed long verbal duels with no cuts, pushing each other to exhaustion. Tony Scott kept the set temperature high and lighting low to replicate submarine suffocation. Crew members wore sweat-soaked uniforms for continuity until they looked like men trapped in steam. At release, critics debated its politics, but submariners praised its procedural truth. It captured the pressure of command decisions where one radio signal could end the world. The sound design, Metal Creek's sonar hums, muffled breathing, turned the submarine itself into a character. Nearly 30 years later, Crimson Tide remains a near-perfect thriller. It understood that the scariest enemy is not another submarine. It is a human being convinced he is right. Number 3. K-19, The Widowmaker, 2002. When K-19, The Widowmaker premiered, audiences expected another Hollywood thriller. What they got instead was an unflinching descent into the moral nightmare of Cold War command. Directed by Catherine Bigelow and starring Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson, it chronicled the true story of the Soviet Union's first nuclear submarine, an engineering triumph that became a floating tomb. The film follows Captain Alexei Vostrikov, played by Ford, who takes command of the newly built K-19 despite its rushed construction. When a reactor leak threatens to trigger a nuclear explosion deep beneath the Arctic Ocean, the crew must choose between loyalty and survival. Men volunteer to enter the radioactive chamber, knowing it means certain death. There are no explosions, no glamour, just duty and decay. Russian critics condemned it as Western propaganda, but veterans who survived the real K-19 disaster quietly admitted its accuracy. The sonar silence, the reactor schematics, the suffocating tension, they were painfully real. Some scenes of radiation burns were so authentic that they had to be toned down for Western release. Behind the scenes, Bigelow fought studio pressure to add more action. She insisted the film remain faithful to the slow, dying rhythm of submarine life. Ford and Neeson underwent extensive training with real submariners. The production built a full-scale model of the K-19 inside a shipyard in Halifax, complete with working bulkheads and leaking valves. It bombed at the box office, but its legacy endured. K-19. The Widowmaker exposed what few Cold War films dared to show, the fallibility of both sides. It was not about good or evil, but about men obeying orders they no longer believed in. The silence after its ending felt heavier than applause. Number 2. Below, 2002. At first glance, Below looked like a routine World War II thriller, but then the lights went out. Directed by David Twohy and co-written by Darren Aronofsky, it fused supernatural horror with military realism. The result was a haunting submarine tale where guilt pressure and ghosts shared the same oxygen. The story begins with an American submarine rescuing survivors from a British hospital ship. Soon, strange noises fill the sonar. Orders vanish from logbooks. Reflections appear where no man stands. As the crew begins to turn on each other, the captain's death and a hidden war crime rise to the surface. What set Below apart was its procedural accuracy. Even in its moments of terror, the sonar operations ballast procedures and emergency routines were depicted with startling authenticity. Navy advisors helped stage scenes of underwater damage control and acoustic deception, giving the supernatural elements an unnerving realism. Behind the scenes, Twohy insisted the film avoid digital effects. Everything from sonar pulses to flooding compartments was built practically. The actors endured real underwater pressure tanks and rotating set sections designed to simulate the crushing motion of a dive. The sound design, metal creaks, depth alarms, and distorted breathing turned paranoia into atmosphere. Critics were divided. Some dismissed it as a genre hybrid, too weird for war buffs and too technical for horror fans. Yet, over the years, it gained cult status among submarine enthusiasts who recognized its meticulous details. The ghost story was allegory, the haunting of men who followed orders too well. Below remains the only submarine thriller that captures the literal and moral darkness of command. It understood that every depth charge echoes inside the soul long after the war ends. Number 1. The Cruel Sea, 1953. Before any of the high-tech nuclear thrillers came The Cruel Sea. Shot in stark black and white, it was not about submarines themselves, but about those who hunted them. Yet, its understanding of naval warfare, its attention to sonar patterns, convoy tactics, and command pressure set the standard for every submarine film that followed. Based on Nicholas Montserrat's novel, it follows Commander Erickson, played by Jack Hawkins, as he commands a corvette escorting convoys through the Atlantic. His enemy is unseen, silent, deadly. The film captures the exhaustion of continuous war, the freezing nights, the radar ghosts, the moral agony of attacking without certainty. When Erickson orders depth charges, knowing they might kill survivors in the water, the silence that follows is unbearable. British audiences hailed it as a masterpiece of realism. Real veterans wept in theaters, recognizing the routines, the jargon, the hopeless nights. There were no heroes, just men doing their jobs in a war without glory. Naval officers later used the film to train recruits in convoy procedures because it depicted command decision-making with near-documentary accuracy. Behind the scenes, authenticity ruled. The Royal Navy provided ships and crew. Filming took place in real Atlantic conditions, causing cameras to jam from salt and cold. Hawkins reportedly suffered hypothermia during one storm sequence, but refused to stop shooting. Director Charles Friend wanted every wave to feel like judgment itself. The film carried no propaganda. It carried truth. That courage at sea meant surviving, not conquering. Decades later, The Cruel Sea still stands as the most honest film about submarine warfare, from the surface, view above it all, yet trapped in the same ocean of fear. In the silent world below the surface, truth and duty blur into echoes. Each of these forgotten submarine thrillers dared to capture that weight, the impossible decisions made in metal coffins far from sunlight. So which one would you risk your breath for? Tell us below. Like, subscribe, and dive with us into history's hidden depths.